After decades with corporate media powerhouses like Comcast or NBC Universal, today's guest left all of that to be in the short-term rental space. He started with his own short-term rental and then bought more and more and eventually became a co-host. So he has a lot to share about what it's like to buy and manage short-term rentals. He shares some of his top tips for dealing with insurance claims, for dealing with guest complaints, for everything that comes up with short-term rentals. So if you're an investor who's at all interested in short-term rentals, be sure to tune in to this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Freedom Blueprint. I am Adrienne Green, and today I'm excited to have with me Jason Muth. Welcome to the podcast.
Adrienne, thanks for having me. That is so much more exuberance than I have on my podcast when we launch the very intro of ours. So I'm going to have to take a page out of that. Your setting is great. I mean, we were just talking off camera as to where you're recording this from, a house that's older than the United States. I mean, how inspiring is that? Whatever thing is behind you looks beautiful. I have boring drywall, right?
I am lucky in this one that I've got something kind of scenic for recording. I'm not always that fortunate, but it is something that I appreciate today. And I'm excited for you to share your story because I know, like so many listeners that I have, you have transitioned from that corporate world, right? You were with media powerhouses like Comcast, NBC Universal, iHeartMedia, and you made that jump to real estate investing. You were able to get that financial freedom to walk away from that W-2. So I'm so excited for you to share that story with us today.
Sure. Well, thank you for asking. And I did work in the media business. I say over 25 years, but it was longer. But the grays that are coming in a lot right now show my actual true age, despite the fact that I still feel like I'm a 16-year-old, as I'm sure that we all do. Right. But yeah, I found my way into the media business back in the 90s. I worked on the research side for almost 10 years with companies that eventually became iHeartMedia. I transitioned into the digital world shortly thereafter. And then I worked on the sales side. So I was a sales manager and a sales director for almost 13 years for local media companies here in New England. And, between those two kind of roles, it was over 20 something years of working around broadcasters, like around studios, around talent, around people that, were behind the scenes, and when I got into the business, I only thought it was people that were on camera and behind a microphone. And here we are behind a microphone again. But, I loved that industry. And I just decided that there were behind the scenes jobs that probably paid much better than some of the on-air jobs. And that's what I did. That's how I kind of funded my life for many, many years and a couple decades. And eventually, my parents stopped asking if I was going to go to med school, and they stopped realizing they had to worry about me because they weren't sending me money. And whatever I was doing seemed to work out fine, despite the fact they had no idea what it was. They thought I was still a DJ. Probably to this day, who knows? They know that we're doing real estate now. But, I decided that I wanted to diversify my investments. And, life was not just going to be the one condo that we owned in Boston and my 401k or whatever investments that we had. So we started listening to Bigger Pockets over a decade ago. My profile dates back to 2015 on there. And we used to listen to the podcast all the time. It was very inspiring to hear people's stories. I'm sure you did too. Were you a Bigger Pockets fan back in the day, or are you still?
Yeah, I thought that they provided great resources. I did a lot of investing before I knew about Bigger Pockets. And then once I did, I was like, oh, well, this is easier.
Yeah. And we never did the house hacking thing. I mean, I did the opposite. Like the first condo I bought into a great neighborhood in Boston. And the second bedroom I had there, I decided I wanted to be my office. It was my home office. I was working remotely at the time, and I didn't want to take a roommate on. I'm an only child, for God's sake. I like my own space. So I did exactly what they said not to do. Like every Bigger Pockets person would have house hacked that and put somebody in there and pay their own mortgage. And instead, I doubled my rent payment and took on the mortgage and basically lived there with my independence, but didn't realize what I could have been doing for many, many years in building all that wealth and equity up.
The cool thing about real estate investing is you can do it any way you want. And so I love that, hey, you're an only child, house hacking wasn't for you. You found something else that did work.
I did. It's 9 years ago at this point, we bought our first investment property. And it was just about a year into listening to Bigger Pockets. And a lot of what Bigger Pockets taught back then was, really just get in the game. Just do it. Just find an investment. Don't just keep analyzing over and over and over. And then you eventually just realize life gets in the way and you choose not to do that. So we put our money where our mouth was. We found a home on a lake in New Hampshire that is down the street from where my husband's parents had a second home. Long story short, they've been going up to this lake for decades, and it's not Lake Winnipesaukee. It's a smaller lake called Baxter Lake. I don't know, 15 years ago, my in-laws decided to start renovating summer camps that were on that lake and turn them into like full homes, and they've retired to one of them right now. And we said, if we're going to be coming up to this lake for the rest of our lives, because, a child was in the future, we now have a 6-year-old daughter, we wanted our own space. So there was a house for sale down the street 9 years ago. And, deals were had back then. There were price adjustments and, it was a 2,000 square foot, Cape style house. We looked at it, looked great, sturdy, structurally sound, needed some aesthetic spruce ups. And we decided to take the leap and buy the second home and take on this mortgage of $691 and whatever cents. And I know that number because it's the same mortgage I have today on that property. 3.5% interest, 30-year fixed. It's a steal compared to what, the house is worth $500,000 right now. And it's paid for itself many times over with all the short-term rentals you've done with it. But we decided to Airbnb the house. We didn't know how to do anything on Airbnb, but we figured we would learn along the way. And that's exactly what we did. Made a bunch of mistakes, in those first couple of years. It was all very DIY, no, dynamic pricing, no automations, mistakes with how we communicated with guests, mistakes with how we did or didn't take care of things that needed to get done at the house. I remember the very first couple months that we bought the place, we knew that there was a pipe that was at risk of freezing. And we decided to stupidly just tell our guests, oh, can you leave this faucet on a drip because it might freeze? Sure enough, they didn't. And it froze and it burst and it flooded the whole place. One of my many, many issues I've had with water over the years. That one was not that difficult to solve, though. Like a lot of towels, a lot of drying, some drywall repair, and we got that back up and running. But a lot of mistakes. Like no one was teaching us how to do it. We were doing it on the weekends while we were working full-time jobs. And it eventually worked into where we are today, which I'll talk about after your question.
Well, there's so much to pull out of that. One of the first things that I'd like to talk is, you said you've got that same mortgage. Now, when you first bought the place, I'm curious, how did the numbers look as an investment? Did it look like, oh my goodness, amazing, knock out of the park? Or was it like, hey, this is going to be good enough and it's something we want personally?
So we did want it personally also. We wanted to be able to use the property, which we did use a lot those first few years until we eventually bought some other properties. And we still could use it to this day. I mean, it's a great home. I've had friends up there. I've hosted Thanksgivings up there. We have great memories. When my daughter walks in the home, she wants to watch Cocomelon still. I mean, she's like almost 6.5, but she remembers watching a lot of Cocomelon back during COVID when we came up to the house and lived there for 3 years. So, I think that we probably just took a leap and a risk with the numbers at the time. The house, we purchased it for $192,000. We put 20% down. Half of that down payment, or not quite half of it, but a third of the down payment I won in a casino, which I've talked about on other podcasts where, it turned into the title of the podcast. But I just got super lucky and hit a royal flush on a game called Let It Ride. And I bet, and basically Let It Ride allows you to kind of pull back your bets if you don't like what you're seeing on the table. And, I was dealt 3 cards to the royal flush, and the other 2 that were communal cards on the table turned out to be the other 2 cards I needed for the royal flush. So, I won 5,000, what was it? It was 1,000 to 1 on each of my $5 bets, betting minimum at the table. Like I'm not a high stakes gambler, but we won 15 grand. I would have won $400,000 if I'd bet the progressive, but I didn't do that because nobody was doing it. And, long story short, I got about $12,500 cash about 10 years ago and said, I'm going to invest this. And sure enough, it turned into part of the down payment for the house. But, I didn't know it was almost $700 a month extra plus expenses. I was nervous to tell my parents that we were doing this because they, of course, are very conservative. And they were like, where are you going to get the money for that? And, how are you going to be able to pay for that along with everything else? But we made it work. And then we saw the property going up in value. We saw that it was paying for itself. We saw it started eventually making money for us. And quickly thereafter, we decided, let's just do this again and then again and then again. You just kind of keep finding your way with additional investment properties. It gets very addictive.
It definitely does, even if you're not a gambler. But what I love, because I just had a conversation this week with somebody from the Northeast, and she wants to do short-term rentals and get the tax benefits and everything like that. And yet, when you look at those numbers for year one, it can be daunting. It can be scary, especially when someone is like you or when they got started, Jason, when they don't know how to do things yet, right? And they have full-time jobs. And so it can be like, okay, this is something I don't know anything about. I have a full-time job. The numbers don't look great on year one. Why am I even doing this? And so can you kind of speak to why are they doing it, and speak to that long-term vision that really helps see, the benefit?
Yeah, it's really hard to find deals that will cash flow immediately these days, right? Given where interest rates are, where prices are, just the general economy. Like there might be people that are scaling back in some areas. Like our places are doing well. Like we keep going up in terms of what we're getting for revenue because I think we're really fortunate and good at what we're doing and made some good choices. But yeah, like people buying right now, I think they're going to have a very hard time getting that first year numbers to look like you're going to be, in the black. I don't think it's going to happen in most situations. So we always tell people like, well, yeah, why are you doing this? Is this a house that you also want to use and make some memories at? If that's the case, then yeah, go for it. If you feel like it's an appreciating market, if you feel like you're going to have some utility in the property yourself and you think that you actually can enjoy it, there is value to that. That's non-monetary value. Don't just buy something just to buy something because you could just rent somebody else's place and not have all the headaches. But real estate over time has tended to be a really solid investment. And the Northeast especially, it's been steady Eddie. Like it's not one of these markets that like shoots up during COVID and then drops back down. It's just been a steady increase over time in many markets. In fact, I just saw some study yesterday about like real estate markets. There's one route outside Boston, Beverly, Massachusetts, just south of us, which apparently is like the number one community according to whatever metric, for buying real estate these days. Yeah, so we've just had success in New Hampshire. We like New Hampshire because it's a multi-season property, like, summer, fall, and winter. The spring's kind of a little muddy, but everything else, people are always going to New Hampshire for leaf peeping or summer or lake or the ocean or skiing or whatever. So we think it's been a good investment for us, but people are listening to this around the country, around the world, and not every market is like that. But is there a market near where you live that people are going to want to go to or historically have gone to for a long time that maybe you too can enjoy with your family, and then over time, this property could pay you back and then some? That's the risk that we took, and it seemed to pay off.
Now, one thing you're making me think of as well, a little bit of a tangent here, and yet I think it'd be helpful for listeners, is how much do you consider, like with New Hampshire, or did you consider initially how the regulations being friendly to short-term rentals? What does that regulation environment look like where you're investing, and what do you recommend to other investors in that sense for short-term rentals?
So New Hampshire is very town by town. We operate in Farmington and Guilford, New Hampshire. Farmington has 0 regulations at this point. Guilford is regulated, where I have a license issued through the town. It was voted on by the townspeople. I couldn't vote on it because I don't live there full time. So basically the residents vote on behalf of all of us that are short-term renting our properties. It's good to kind of know what the rules are. There's a little bit of a risk in one of our markets where we don't really know what the rules are and they could become anything, but so far so good there. I don't know. I kind of have a mixed feeling about it because a lot of other communities in New Hampshire are putting up some really restrictive regulations. And I think that like some of them have been challenged in courts. I'm not sure exactly the outcome of all those court cases, but this is probably not atypical of other markets all around the country. So, we'll abide by the rules. I mean, our other market, Provincetown, Massachusetts, that's always been a regulated town. And now the Commonwealth of Massachusetts also is adding things on top of that. So with our new certificates that we have to get, we also have to get inspections by a fire department or a representative from the state, I believe, which is not something that we've ever had to do in Provincetown up until this new cycle. I had to do it in Guilford, where the fire chief came out, checked everything out. I get what they want to do, but like they're not doing this for long-term rentals. And that's what's a little frustrating is that, I feel like there's kind of a bit of a double standard where somebody could just rent anybody for 365 days out of the year, and they're not going to make sure that, your garage door swings closed like they did for hours. But if I want to operate, that's what I have to do. But I will say, I don't know if Guilford people are listening to this. I don't think that they don't have a plan as to how to uphold the regulations they put in place. Like they voted on it, but they're not coming down on people that didn't get the licenses. So that part is a little disconcerting.
Right. Yes. If they're going to have something, it needs to be fairly applied to everyone.
Correct. Which I don't
I
think that
feel
they kind of understood, when this passed. It was just a vote that passed. Have the townspeople vote. All right. They have voted on it. All right. Now what do you do? I mean, like they couldn't even get their application together, by the deadline that the law, was enacted. And I said, well, where's the application? They said, well, it's not ready yet. I said, but I'm supposed to have my certificate by now. So, okay, I'll just wait till you're ready. It's very Wild West. I mean, like it's usually these things get voted on by like a board of selectmen or by the town. And then suddenly another group has to administer this and figure out how to actually process it. I'm sure that there are some markets around the country that are really, really buttoned up with it, but there's others where it's just, okay, now what do we do? That's, I think, where we are with a lot of these markets.
Yeah, I will say because I own in for short-term rentals in Myrtle Beach, and it's such a long time vacation rental market that they really had everything in place, and it was really clear, and it's different, in the city limits versus the county and things, and yet it's clear and easy. But, I lived and worked in Chattanooga, Tennessee for a long time, and they were changing their regulations, and they had like what you're speaking where, there was an inspection and, railings had to be a certain height and windows had to be a certain distance from the floor. And it really got to be difficult with some of the older houses, especially in the
Mhm.
town because they have 100-year-old houses there. And yeah, the people are figuring it out. I feel like even though we think of short-term rentals as a pretty established strategy in a lot of towns, it's pretty new or it's grown so much that the government really they don't have it figured out yet. They still don't have it figured out.
They don't, and then everyone has opinions about short-term rentals, and, like, you never know if the person that's gonna be inspecting your property, also has a baked-in opinion as to whether or not they believe this is something that they should be doing or not. I mean, let's face it, people aren't coming to inspect your property just to, like, rubber stamp it and say everything's great, right? If you're gonna give someone the authority to do this, like, they're gonna come find stuff at every one of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, very true. It's, like a home inspection. They don't feel like they're doing their job if they don't find something, right?
Right, you're hiring a home inspector to, like, let you know what things to watch out for if you're purchasing this property. They're never gonna just say, "Clean bill of health, everything's checked off, good." I mean, because then they're not doing the job that they think that you've hired them for.
Right. So, what I would love to hear, I know we have a lot more of your story to go over here. You told us a lot about that first short term rental, and I know you expanded into others. What about your experience with the first one? Because now, you had your own place you could enjoy yourself with your family, and, you had that. What made you think, I want more?
Well, at first we had additional money to invest and we were looking for a second market. So we bought a property actually, I think I bought the land next door to the house I've already described first because the land came up for sale. It was like $28,000. It was a wooded lot. And I said, listen, if anyone's going to buy this land, it's going to be me because I'd rather control what happens on this land. I think we took out a HELOC on that property, which I still have open to this day. And we bought the land and, we've kind of used that HELOC off and on as a piggy bank for various, needs. Sometimes there's nothing drawn from it. Sometimes there's money drawn from it. So we did that and then paid it off. And we eventually built a beautiful house on that land. But after we did that, we bought a property in Provincetown, Mass, which was a second vacation home loan that I was able to get because of the distance from where we lived. So it was a different lender. And they said, yeah, you're welcome to have multiple vacation home loans in your name because you could be in multiple vacation markets. Right. So I had enough for a down payment for that property. We bought that back in 2018. That's turned into another really amazing investment because that market has shot up in the 7 years since then. We worked our way up to the numbers that we're at right now, and we operate a business in Provincetown right now called Pride Away Stays. And Pride Away Stays is a co-host for, at this point, almost 25 other properties in that market. We just launched that about a year and a half ago because we really didn't see anybody doing it local that knew how to do it well, that spoke to the LGBTQ plus community, that really had a foothold in the marketplace because we're also owners in the market that wanted to just build a business that served the market. So, we launched that and it kind of grew pretty quickly. We just had our best month ever. Like, we're recording this in the summertime. The next best month ever. Yeah. Not without challenges, and running any business is going to have any kind of challenge. But yeah, we bought into that market as well. And we didn't know about our daughter at the time, frankly. We bought into that market. We were getting our property ready. And then we found out that we were selected for adoption. So she came shortly after we bought it, frankly. And we decided to use the property less and just rent it more. So we do go down there on a fairly regular basis, especially with the business now. But yeah, I try to rent that as much as I can. And we learned about the Provincetown market. So, now here we're operating in two different places, Farmington and Provincetown, living in Boston, kind of in between those two. And, then we just kept wanting to scale up, so then I wanted to build on that land that I bought, and we bought house plans and sat on them for a couple of years and eventually decided to go forward with that. So I got a construction loan for that property and closed on that at the absolute lowest of all the rates that we've seen over the past 20 years. So that loan
What
is
was that?
never 3%,
Very
never
nice.
going to touch it. And that was a great loan product. I guess the bank is called Lighthouse Credit Union now, but they were Northeast Credit Union at the time. And it was a 30-year fixed or 30-year amortized loan where the first year was a draw period where you're building the house. Right. And we built the house, it was basically just draws and interest on the draws. And then it converted automatically into the remaining 29 years. No more closed, not a second, it was already closed.
Very nice.
We just got lucky that we closed it. I think that loan closed in November of 21, which was like just the bottom of all the interest rates. So It's that property is doing amazingly. Like, we love using it. It sleeps 14 people. It's this gorgeous new construction home with these beautiful triangular windows. And we built it with short-term rental in mind, so we wanted to maximize the bedroom space. We finished the basement from the start, and, there's a solo stove there, Adirondack chairs, beautiful
Right.
deck, lots of games. My 2,500 CD collection is there from my years working in the radio business, which, always gets comments. And it was a great process building it. Like, we filmed everything from, breaking ground to finishing the property. That also had a flood about a year into it when a guest left the faucet on during a power outage and stopped up the
No.
sink. So I've talked about that on multiple podcasts about this $130,000 insurance claim that we had, but we got through that as well. Shout out to
Hmm.
Proper Insurance.
Okay.
And that is doing great. That property is doing really, really well. It makes a lot of revenue. We love using it. It looks beautiful, and we learned a lot along the way in building this house.
Feeling overwhelmed managing your rental portfolio? What if you could run it like a business and free up your time? My one-on-one coaching program helps investors like you build systems at scale so you can grow without the chaos. Book a free strategy session today at adriennegreen.com/coaching. You'll find the link in the show notes. Well, I'd love to dig into that insurance claim because that is something that terrifies people. So, what tips would you have, having gone through a pretty large insurance claim situation? What advice or wisdom would you give to investors if they have something that happens in their house that looks like it's going to be a big insurance claim? What should they do?
From my perspective, I decided to move all of my policies over into Proper Insurance, which is specifically for short-term rentals. The premiums are higher, but I felt better covered. I mean, like, the claim process was relatively simple compared to most claim processes. There was no fighting with adjusters. It was nothing. It was like very straightforward. We had everything documented. We submitted everything on time. We had the right coverages. They covered like up to $50,000 worth of lost income, because I had that written into the policy, that's a standard coverage of theirs. The limit is different. I would just say make sure your insurance company knows what you're doing if you're working in the short-term rental space. I mean, a lot of people think they're fully covered and then they find out that they're not. I wouldn't even go to anybody else for insurance. I mean, I switched all 5 of the properties that we own as investments over into Proper just because I think that they're the best of the bunch. But I would recommend not freaking out. Like, we got a phone call at 2:30 in the morning from the fire department because my neighbor thought the house was on fire because steam was coming off the windows. As it turned out, it was just hot water because we have on-demand hot water, and it just ran for 5 hours and flooded the whole place. So we didn't freak out. We went up to the house to see what happened. It was, like, gut-wrenching because you just built this gorgeous house, and then
Mm-hmm.
9 months later, you have to kind of start again. But we just moved quickly. Like, we got ServPro involved very quickly. They were on
Yeah.
site within a couple hours, got the insurance claim opened up. I called my builder back. Always pay your contractors on time, if not early. I had a great relationship with my builder. Like, the building process, there were like 6 or 7 draws throughout the process. And a draw is basically when they do all this work and then we draw from the account that had been set up to pay for all the building work, like from the bank. And I got him paid within a day after every time he submitted something,
Wow.
like literally running around getting checks like for him. So, I think that I was a really easy client. I was low maintenance. I took his advice in lots of situations. I trusted him. So when I called him and said, "Hey, Rick, I got an issue at the house. Are you guys available to kind of do some rebuild work?" They were. And he was able to kind of get his crew back and engaged for the next 3 months to get everything back in line. And he got paid again. I mean, like, these people aren't doing this stuff for free. So I do have to think there's a level of appreciation that I was able to give him additional work. Like, I certainly don't think that he worked, and had his subs working for us at cost for 3 months just because he felt bad for us. So I just treated people really nicely and got everything done. And, I was on site frequently to document stuff, but, it wasn't easy to have to cancel guests. That kind of stunk. We had 5 sets of guests we had to cancel, but, great thing about Proper Insurance is they paid us out for those guests. They paid us out for the time that the property was not booked, but probably would have been booked, because the booking window is relatively short in the off season. So, the presumption that I had to prove from having good records is that it would have been booked at this level. So then they paid me out at a certain rate for a lot of that as well. There's a lot that goes into it. I don't wish this on anybody, but I felt like I had the right cover
Mhm.
given the systems
Right.
I set up.
Well, and what I'm hearing here is the importance of, like you said, having the right coverage from the get-go and also handling things right away, right? When something is nasty or unpleasant, people tend to procrastinate, but that's only going to make it worse, right? And so I hear that you're like, let's handle it right away, and that you just kind of, I guess, I don't want to say you reap what you sow, but that's what I'm also thinking when you talk about your contractor there is, when you have good relationships, when you sow those seeds of working well with people and being responsible, you are creating a situation where when you need that reciprocity, it's there for you.
Yeah, I could agree more. I mean, I try to get things done on the quicker side. I mean, we all have our list, our A list, B list, and C list of like things that need to get done at our properties. But I try to like quickly triage and see, is this something that is like an immediate thing that I need to take care of, like ASAP? Is it a mechanical issue that I have guests there that's it's impacting their experience plus it's impacting the property? Or is it something that can get put off, right? Like I had a guest a
Right.
couple days ago, I think it was yesterday actually, let me know that the kitchen faucet wasn't working, but when they turned it on, the sprayer was just spraying water underneath the cabinet beneath. And I'm like, that's really strange. But they're describing it all to me. And I'm like, there must be some issue down there. And we eventually figured out that with a dishwasher repair that I had gotten done, they kind of didn't put the hoses in correctly. And it was causing a lot of friction with the hose for the sprayer. So it all got frayed underneath. And then the water wasn't making it out the spigot. So that I had to fix immediately, got an emergency plumber
Right.
over there to do that. Like those kind of things you have to like react fast. I had an HVAC issue a couple weeks ago when we were on our trip. I was in Iceland troubleshooting this. And I do have a team of people that can do these kind of things. But like some of the stuff with my properties, if it's like handyman work, I tend to jump in for those kind of things. I had to solve that thing. So I had to get an HVAC company over there. And it turned out that I just hadn't changed the filter with enough time. I know, like the filter was so clogged up and
Hmm.
basically the airflow was terrible. And it was causing
Right.
everything to freeze and no air conditioning. So, lesson to me, like change your filters like on a
Hmm.
more regular basis than you think you should. But I troubleshot that. I had a house full of people. It was a heat wave coming. They need air conditioning. So what do I need to
Right.
do to make sure there's air conditioning there? I need to like pay for emergency services, get people over there and get it solved. Like,
Hmm.
that's what you have
Right.
to do, like when you're hosting these properties.
Right. I think it's part of matrix with like urgent and important. And some things can be important but not urgent. And then some things are both urgent and important, like HVAC and water leaks. Those both
Yeah.
count as urgent and important.
Oh my God. Water is like the death of me. It's just been like constant in my life over the past couple of years. But I guess like when you put yourself out there and have more and more properties that you either own or are partially responsible for, the likelihood you're going to have water issues of any kind of element, any kind of manner is higher because there's more chances for me to have water issues and they stink.
Well, and I'd say issues in general, right? More houses, more guests, more chances for stuff to pop up, but
Hmm.
also more money. So that's the flip
More money
side.
in both directions coming out the door too. As we speak, I have a new hot water heater being installed in one of my other properties because this is another thing that happened. Like we're on our cruise and like I get a phone call. Like I happen to be on the internet and it's one of my guests that's saying that like the regulator on the tub would not turn off. Water was not stopping. He's like, your tub is going to overflow. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm turning the thing. It's not turning off. And it's a below grade bathroom. So everything pumps up. So the pump wasn't able to keep up with the drain and it was accumulating in the tub. So, what do you do there? You turn the water off to the building and you irritate the other people that are in the building. But like, I'm like, sorry, but I'm not going to have a flood in my place because you can't shower upstairs for a couple hours. Let me figure this out. We figured it out, but it required a whole new regulator, emergency service, cutting into drywall, solving it from the backside, smoothing things over with my upstairs neighbors because I had to cut the water off for a couple hours unexpectedly. Well, life goes on.
Right. We could have a whole episode just talking about multifamily, right? And the unique nuances
Yeah.
that come to sharing walls and water and all of those things. It can
Yes.
be a blessing and it can also cause some trouble, but that'll be another time. We'll have to have you back for that, Jason.
Yeah. I mean, like I was very unwilling to have my place flood at the inconvenience of the upstairs renters. So put it that way.
Yes, especially it's, not days, it's a couple hours. But
Correct.
we have talked for a while now and it's time to wrap up. So we're going to jump into our closing questions. So first one for you, Jason, what is your go-to tool for managing operations?
So we use Hospitable for our property management software, and I've used them for 3 years at this point. I can't believe that I operated without them, even when I only had 5 properties that we owned, which I said I never was going to launch a co-hosting business. And sure enough, here we did. And now my Hospitable looks like you just keep scrolling down, scroll, you see all these different properties. We use that and they've been a great partner. We've, spoken with the higher ups there. We appreciate their product roadmap. We appreciate everything they're adding on, not without issues, but they've been terrific. We also use Price Labs for our dynamic pricing. I know Hospitable has their own dynamic pricing right now, but we've been on Price Labs for a couple of years as well, and just kind of trust their systems, and we're going to stick with them for a little while longer. But those two, I think, have really helped us operate our business well and grow it.
I also could, I feel like, write sonnets about my love for both of those systems. So we are on the same page there. Next, what is one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self when you were starting out?
When I was starting out in the real estate investing side, or like when I was starting out in life after college?
Your choice.
I would have gotten into the real estate investing sooner than I did. I think my first investment property was when I turned 41, but I really thought that I should just stay on the straight and narrow and, be a hardworking worker bee for other people for a long time and eventually get ahead, and then you get to retire and life goes on. But, these past couple of years, like when my job ended 3 years ago and I was forced to do this full time, which I was planning on doing anyway, it was a big blessing in disguise. It put me on this path a few months quicker than I thought it was going to be. And it made this, what I need to be doing full time. And like, we're just killing it compared to where I was a couple of years ago. I think that like we were smart in investing when we did. And I don't think it's easy to just up and quit your job or be laid off and then just jump into this without having done any investing. I'm glad that we kind of had like a transition between the two, like a relatively long transition too. I mean, like we were real estate investors for 7 years before my job ended, 6 or 7 years. So I would just say get started sooner. And those first couple of years, I mean, yeah, you don't want bad deals, but you might not be making a ton of money on these deals that first year, even that second year, but just have a longer term horizon and these things will pan out.
Right, exactly. I feel like so many people, they sit on the sidelines waiting to find that home run. And the truth is, if you hit a single, you're still on base. You're in the game, better than being on the bench. So I love that. Get started sooner, and make it happen, even if it isn't the home run. And then finally, what is a book or resource, podcast, something like that, that's been transformational in your investing journey?
Yeah, I very much have not been on the book tip of late. I know that like a lot of people talk about financial freedom and real estate investing books and mindset books, and I've read a lot of them. They all kind of say the same thing in my opinion. So, and I don't really have the patience and time to sit down or even listen to like long books right now. I'm going to go back to Bigger Pockets. I really think that they set us on the pathway for where we are today. I don't listen to the podcast as religiously now as I used to, but, I know it's there. It's always available for me to like pop in and, they're familiar faces. I think that Dave Meyer does a fantastic job with everything he publishes. I kind of follow him a little bit more on Instagram than the 30 to 60-minute episodes of the podcast, but I'll catch him every so often. It's always that kind of reliable go-to where I fully trust what they say, and I can always kind of go back to it if I need a refresher or just like additional motivation in the real estate investing that I'm doing.
Well, and I think you bring up another good point there too. I think there's a lot of real estate investing education happening on Instagram.
Yeah. I mean, like we're really amping up our Instagram as well. I mean, like, our podcast that we've had you on, Adrienne, and the episode, by the time this comes out, your episode will also be out on Smart Stay Show. We're about 270 episodes into Smart Stay Show. It used to be more focused on real estate law. Then we transitioned it just about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, into fully short-term rentals. And then, we have a coaching business, Smart Stay Coaching, and we're trying to publish some more content on Instagram that is helpful and of value to people as well. So, we're definitely leaning into Instagram a little bit more just because there's a lot of great like producers and content creators that are on there. And, it's kind of hard to sift through like who's really full of it and who's really doing it. You get the sense that some people are really more into like their Instagram personality than the actual work. To me, it's opposite. Like we're doing the work, we're just not taking credit for it on Instagram. And like, it's a bit of a begrudging process for me to kind of have to talk about myself all the time on my own Instagram feed. But, that's
Right.
how apparently you build an audience of people that might want to trust you and, work with you. So we're going to be doing a little bit more of that of late.
And that feeds perfectly into the last thing I'm going to ask you, Jason. If people would like to continue the conversation or learn more, what is the best way for them to reach out?
So you can go to @JasonMuth, MUTH, on Instagram. There's a link there that gets to everywhere else you'll probably need to find us. If you want to follow Smart Stay Show, I'd encourage you to listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, because we also do a video version of it. And yeah, those are the great great spots to find us.
Perfect. And check that out in the show notes, listeners, so you can grab it there. Now, thank you so much, Jason. This has been a great conversation. And for the listeners, if you loved today's episode, please, please, please take a moment to just subscribe, because we drop a new episode every Monday. So that way you can get our next amazing guest and their wisdom. Plus, leave a review. Tell me what you loved. Tell me what helped you. And then think about what investor you know who could benefit from hearing Jason's story and wisdom. And go ahead and shoot this over to them right now. And then I'll see you again next week for another episode of The Freedom Blueprint.